Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Wholesale Hotties, a place where ladies in real estate are talking about real estate. I'm your host and MC for the evening, Sharon Lee Smith, together with my other co-host, Donda Mullinex. Hey, Donda. Monique Fell. Hi, Monique. How are you? And Jennifer Stewart. Hey, Jen. How are you doing?
Doing great.
I am so glad to be back on the show. I have not been on this show since January, and it's April. I've been through all kinds of stuff, but girls, I'm so glad to be back. Thank you for your patience with me.
It's not the same without you, Sharon.
I'm so glad to be here. Absolutely. Today we have a really awesome guest, and her name is Courtney Fricke. And Courtney solves problems. I love this girl. She has this amazing podcast. She, we learn all about what she does on there, but she is just amazing in finding solutions where so many other investors don't see like there's going to be any way to fix it. And I want to hear all her stories. I'm so excited to have her on. So Courtney, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to Wholesale Hotties.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. And thanks for coming out of a little mini retirement to come back to the
show. Definitely not retired. Anyway, so let's start at the beginning. How did you get into real estate in the first place?
I ultimately got into real estate truly as I needed some sort of solution because I wanted independence. And when you talk about independence, ultimately, I did not want to be dependent. I did not want to be dependent on a spouse, family, whether it's family today or like a future inheritance, an employer. I didn't want to be independent. I wanted to be independent from that, right? I watched people around me being so dependent on their job today, or maybe the retirement their job's going to give them, which that's less and less of a thing. I didn't want to be dependent on the government. I didn't want to be, I wanted a sense of independence. And as I started to study that, what I eventually learned was that's called financial independence. And one of the strongest ways to do that is with real estate. And my background's in the nonprofit sector, in the missions sector. And I saw so many people who showed up to help, but they were hand to fist broke. One day they'd spend all their time fundraising, and that would take away from their mission, right? So I really just wanted to say, hey, how can I solve that financial issue, build a strong foundation of financial independence so that I can go, I can do good without having to worry where my next meal is going to come from.
I love that. And I did notice that too, when I was looking at some of your history, because I looked into you, you had got started and got going, and it was a few years before you really kind of more made yourself a little more public and out there, which I think that's so beautiful. I know I see a lot of people out there, they'll like do one deal, and then suddenly they think that they're these masters at what we do, and they're trying to, garner all this interest. I think with the internet and social media, this has become a real problem where people that haven't put in the foundational groundwork to learn things cause more problems that we get to solve. Yeah. Have you had to bail anybody out? Tell me a story about a problem that you've had to solve for maybe another investor that.
It's probably it's a very common phone call I get right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've bought properties subject to the existing loan from other investors. And I actually had a text today from an investor. He said, can I connect you with someone? They bought a property subject to, they now need help. Well, are you open to rescuing them? And it's, I moved from Louisiana to New Orleans to the greater Tampa Bay market just last year. So it's a deal here in the Tampa Bay area. And so I said, yeah, let me take a look at it. That was text message I got 45 minutes to about an hour ago.
Yeah.
And I've probably worked over 100 of those deals.
Yeah.
Where it's some form of creative financing where I have had to do some rescuing, and it's often tied to, paperwork, deal structure, communication, due diligence. Like there's usually some level of a fracture there. That happens. And look, I had one where I was able to help an investor out of a deal, and so I bought it. It was a deal they owned with like a DSCR loan, and I bought it subject to, and I still have it. I'll probably sell it this year, but I've had it for a few years. And she called me a few months ago asking me to buy her dad's house subject to help him because he was in a bind.
Yeah.
And this was another investor. This wasn't a civilian, right?
Right.
Like, and so,
yeah.
I mean,
I know what you mean. Yeah. No, that's a great term. Go ahead.
But the idea there is I absolutely want to be known as a helper, right?
Yeah.
This hat's my hat for a reason, but and so regardless of the source, I'm happy to show up and say, hey, how can I help?
Yeah.
On those deals, Courtney, are you able to, or do you normally go back to the source and have to renegotiate the deal in order to make it be more palatable or doable or long-term?
Great question.
Yeah, so that is a great question. I ultimately, let's just say it's a subject to deal. I would want to go back to the original borrower and redo paperwork.
Yeah.
Because what I don't want to do is to pit myself by structuring a deal today. I don't want to put myself in a future problem.
Yeah.
So whenever you do the deal, that is the best time to set the deal up to win, because you may not have any other chance. And so when I leave that, original deal, like basically the closing, we structure the deal, we go to closing. When I leave that, all I have left to really rely on is the paperwork. And so I'm going to want, especially for a subject to deal, I'm from New Orleans. My main portfolio is all in Louisiana. I can't tell you how many insurance claims I've had to do on subject to deals and things like that. I would never in a million years not want to have control in that way, like with the paperwork, things like that. And so absolutely, those are going to be things I'm going to look at. And I'm going to say, hey, look, I want to basically go back to them and say, hey, this is, I'd like to carry on the situation, the solution right here, right? Sometimes it's been take out that debt altogether, depending on the situation. It just varies.
Yeah.
And since you are such a helper, Courtney, I have this book that you told me to get years ago, Turn Adversaries into Allies by Bob Berg. Mm-hmm. I know that you're an avid reader, and I'd like to come back to that part later. But as you describe yourself as a helper, of course, I find you to be an extreme helper in many, many circumstances over many, many different scenarios with hundreds of people. How do you maintain boundaries where you make sure that you're getting fed and not getting bled respectfully?
So that's a really good question. It goes back to this idea of, so back when I used to do nonprofit work, there were plenty of people who I'd want to help, but they didn't want the help.
Yeah.
So I've stopped foreclosures for over a decade, right? And I have a line that I tell sellers. I say, I have the skills to help you, but I'm not going to fight you to help you. So a big part of that is I am helpful, but I am firm. And look, those early years, I got in the industry in 2014. I have rules in place that have a person's name and face to it, right? From a story, because someone.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
Right. Like took advantage. Right. Yep. One of them, it was an alive hoarder, and I bought a house from an alive hoarder.
Yeah.
After, I have to say it slow because otherwise it sounds like a whore. She was not that. Although I probably would
collector of lots of things.
I mostly just buy hoarder houses.
You would need a lot of kills.
But ultimately, yeah, a lot of that, a lot of cleaning products, all those things. But so does a hoarder house. Like that needs it too. But ultimately, you know, I've bought a lot of hoarder houses in my day, and this was one of the first times I'd ever bought from someone who was alive who was doing the hoarding.
Yeah.
And she was tax delinquent. She was getting up to where it was going to be the 3-year delinquency period where they could then start the process to like take the property in Louisiana. And I mean, I delivered her like 200 boxes, like from the dollar store, not like the dollar store, like yeah, from the back of the dollar store. By the way, in my area, that's where you can get boxes for free. They put them back there. I go and
Ours is a liquor store, but yeah, I gotcha.
So I'm not having to pay for it, but it's like, yeah, but in the back of the store, they put them out there. They're good boxes. Yeah. And I would load up my vehicle every time and I go drop them off. So I brought her a significant number of boxes. I had the dumpster delivered a week before the closing. And like literally a part of my offer was we were going to move her, right? So U-Haul truck moving her. By the way, the place she was moving to, I like took her to appointments with the local apartment complexes. And when that wasn't working out, she had found a brand new mobile home or like a 1 or 2 year old mobile home. And I helped look into the deal, helped with all that part. Yeah. And then I remembered showing up there at 6 a.m. when the closing was for 9 and not a single thing had been packed. And I was like, oh no. And I had guys coming, right? Like coming soon to start loading all this stuff up. And I'm like, okay. So then I'm like, well, I'm just about to start putting stuff in trash bags and boxes and like, we're doing it. And I remember pulling, I don't know how, like logically, I don't know how this happened, but I pulled a magazine and it had mold on it. Again, logically, I don't know how it's on that type of surface, but it had mold. And so I threw it into the dumpster and she saw me and she got in my face and I mean, ripped me one and she was threatening like things that you would, talk to Satan about type of thing. And it was just like, I mean, she was disgusting. And so I just said, okay. So I'm just there. I'm like, so I go get in at that time, my truck and I shut the door and lock it. And I'm just like, I'm not about to yell at a woman who has cancer. She's like 75 years old, all this stuff. But I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can curse, but like basically, oh, something, right? And there is a level there that I was like, okay, what am I going to, like, this deal is like, we're going south here. And I actually called one of my mentors at the time and I was like, hey, give me some advice. I had wholesaled the deal and she was not going to be gone. It was after the closing at that point. And so we ended up structuring a thing where we let her stay at the property that night, but the crew was coming at 8 a.m. So and my guys did 3 trips to her new trailer and her new storage unit with all this stuff. So she basically turned it from new to a hoarder situation again, right? Right. And we do all that. And she still had stuff at the house. And I'm like, we're not, like, it's 7 p.m. Like, we're not, like, I'm like, I gave you 3 trips. Like, you're going to have to figure this out. And at like 3 a.m., I get a phone call from her. And like, I was dead asleep. I wake up to having missed it. And the voicemail is like, basically she was having a medical emergency on like the voicemail. And so I immediately called 911. I was like, I need you guys to go do a wellness check on her. She's at the property. And they're like, we're on the other line with her. I didn't know she was diabetic. She sent herself into a diabetic shock because of like all the dealing with the stuff, right? Like,
yes, you were coming face to face with her mental illness.
Yeah. Yes. And literally that was the day that I basically, so long story short, I get that resolved, all that resolved the next day. It was obviously a whirlwind of like 48 hours. And then I built some SOPs for dealing with an alive hoarder. We will never again move them. We will,
Yeah.
these things. But you know, those are some of the lessons you learned. And that's when I was like, okay, I am fair and I am here to help, but I am also not going to be a charity. I come from the charity world. My business is not a charity.
Yeah.
And I have to delineate the two. Now I
Yeah.
can show up in a charitable way, in a helpful way, but I've got to define it and I have to build those boundaries. And like I said, there's a name and a face for every boundary and rule I've had to really put in place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
And yeah, you're absolutely right. There's ways. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was just going to ask. So there's basically, you've learned your boundaries, and that's the process with anybody doing this, right? You just have to figure out you have to know when to like step back and just like, I can't help this person. I dealt with somebody like that too. I mean, with Susan, and I mean, when I called mental health, they're like, oh, we know her. And
we know her.
Or she's falling through there's holes in the floor. She's falling. It's like,
oh my gosh.
I swear people were like moving her glasses. I'm like, how in the hell would you even know in here? I mean, it was you just have to watch.
And in my local area, what I've done is collect like lists, all the food banks, all the, all the resources that I could possibly hand to them, churches, anything to help them. Because here's what I will do. You're absolutely right. Here's what I'll do. And here's the people that can help you do the things that I will not do. Right.
That's good.
I had a situation where someone, I moved my business to 100% repeat and referral at a certain point. So I moved away from prospecting, cold calling, direct mail. And so one way is I get just tagged a lot on Facebook and like some of the local buy, trade, sell groups on Facebook, right? And in one of those groups, it was kind of like a helping hands type of group. And I had 5 or 6 people tag me. This guy gets on there and he says, the government's taking my house. We're getting, foreclosed on. And we don't have any utilities. I'm like, okay. So I get tagged a lot, right? Because I've stopped foreclosures a lot for over a decade in my area. And so I messaged the person. Knowing his name, it didn't take me long. I found the property, whatnot. But we set an appointment and I go. And I thought he had just lost, power with, getting behind on payments. They were without utilities for a year and a half.
Oh my gosh.
Whoa.
It was a 60-plus-year-old man, his early 20s-year-old son, and then some random ass dude in the back that was just like under a tent in the backyard. And that was their friend just like squatting under a tent. And like in a residential area, by the way, the house was probably worth $250 as ARV. And I'm like, so we started having a conversation. By the way, when I asked him, one of my questions is, what have you done so far to try to stop or delay the foreclosure?
Good
and
question.
He said with a straight face, I called the White House. Oh. And I go, okay, now I'm curious, who picked up? Like, is it a 1-800 number? Do they have a voicemail? Like, and I said, okay, beside that.
That was good. That was quick.
It's like, beside that, when I walk the house, it is easily one of my top 3 worst scenarios where I stopped. I could not, because obviously without water and without power, you can imagine, what's going on with feces, what's going on, all this. By the way, the young man, the 20-year-old son who lived there, was a server at a local restaurant. And I'm like, it's like one of those things, you can't
don't eat there.
Eat out again.
But another reason to cook at home right there.
Look, trust me. I was like, I will never, but I remember having this conversation, and I remember walking over to the son, because the dad, I could just tell mentally, like when he's talking about, it's like the government needs to step in and help me. I'm like, okay, I can't help that. Like at that point, he needs, and he literally needs like a social worker advocate, because he cannot advocate for himself, right?
True,
right,
very true.
So then I go to the young 20-year-old son, thinking maybe there's hope for him, and I go, okay, so you're working at the restaurant, and he's like, well, we just want to get enough money so we can go buy a brand new construction house. And I'm like, you don't have that much equity. But then I'm like, okay, well, have you even talked, like, we started talking through some things, and then he starts telling me how he's waiting on this big settlement. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm seeing that he, by living in that environment, has picked up on, a similar mindset. And
the shared psychosis is what it's called.
all of that. And so I found 2 local social workers, these advocates that, were willing to help. Because ultimately they did not need a real estate solution. They needed way more than that.
Exactly.
And so there's a level there that, because if I were to buy the house from them, number one, I legitimately would be concerned, would they be of right mind to sign?
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
That was one of those. And so knowing that, I absolutely share, and I do the same. Like I have a list, when people are behind, like, again, when I help people who are facing foreclosure, and I'm like, look, if you want to stay in the house, look, I'm happy to give you some ideas. I will point you in the right direction, but I'm not going to go walk down that road with you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And knowing that, as much as my heart, that situation, I was like, look, if these guys, so being there at the house, I was like, I was about to go to a work lunch at a nice restaurant. I had that appointment that I was going to meet with someone. And I had to call that person and be like, I don't have any appetite. And it hit me like square, like in the chest. And so I made 2 phone calls, and I basically raised to where someone would match me, and we would put them in a budget in, like an efficiency unit, like type place for a week. And so I go back, I get on my car, I walk back up to the house. I said, look, if you guys are willing, we'll put you in somewhere that has a fridge and a kitchen, for a week. And they literally looked at me and said, well, which one? And I go, huh. He goes, well, we've been kicked out of a few of them because we disagree with them on certain policies. And I'm like sitting here and I'm like, you know what? Y'all have a great day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I hope you guys get the help you need. But I'm realizing here, could I go pour myself out really until empty, trying to help people who in the first place are never in a position to take that help?
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they have to be able to receive it as well. And sometimes it's their mentality, their mindset, and sometimes it's a true mental illness, and they just don't have the capacity to help themselves or receive help from others. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well, and this goes back to a very prominent real estate principle, which is, like when you're negotiating or structuring a deal, just because you wouldn't say yes or you would say no doesn't mean they would. So don't think for the other party.
Great tip.
Same thing here.
Yeah.
Just because you'd be like, man, I wish someone would have helped me if I was in that position.
Right. Doesn't mean they do. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to let them figure it out for themselves. Like I know we had one gal in Florida and we were like, hey, we just would ask her questions and then she would well, how are you going to, can you borrow money from a friend? Where are you going to find the money to stop the foreclosure? Because she'd already went through 2, what is it, when they, the bank, and then she had payments. Yeah. And so the bank's like, no, we're not giving you a third shot,
Yeah.
We're foreclosing. And so, but you had to kind of go, it took a while to go through this process and where she was like, I need to move. I need to find a new place to live. And once that clicked, you're like, oh God, at least she gets it. And then the house was just we tried to sell it and it just needed way too much work. So we got her hooked up with a short sale agent because she still owed too much. But sometimes you got to and you got to know that sometimes these can take a while because you are having to lead them down that road to where they're the ones, oh, I came up with this great idea. Yeah, I need to move,
Yeah. My main mentor, he told me, he said, Courtney, you have only 2 jobs in this world. He said, you have to help other people, but also you have to ask for help. Yeah. And for some people, my job is to show up and help them. For some people, the way I help them is by finding other people and I ask other people to help me help them. Like the social worker, like someone else. Yeah. Or I help them by not giving, not aiding what they're trying to do.
Well. Yeah. Sometimes it's exactly that. Don't
tough love.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I call it my come to Jesus talk.
Yeah, that's true. We all know a lot of folks who are in trouble with their loans right now, what present advice would you give to operators to avoid getting in trouble with lenders? Not going backwards, but starting right now and going forwards.
Excellent. There could be let me tell a story. There could be two houses right next to each other that are built on the exact same day by the exact same builder. They're worth the same, they would rent the same, and they're being sold for the same amount. But one could be a great deal and one could be a horrible deal. What's the difference? It's the financing.
Yeah.
Right? Again, same price, same square footage, same build, all of that. So many of us are taught that leverage is a way to grow. Absolutely it is. But at the same time, leverage is a two-edged sword. And you've got to understand what is safe and feasible financing. So what that looks like is, do you understand what goes into good debt? A lot of people are getting right now, it's because they have short-term debt, right? So maybe it's a loan for only a short period of time, or it's a balloon. My mentor taught me that balloons are for clowns, or I say clowns or a special occasion. They should not be, if you want time to move by fast, put a balloon in there, right? Because it will. You blink your eye all day, right? So, but that forces you to be a great deal maker on a number of occasions with things that are outside of your control, like the market. So right now, I would rarely do a balloon less than 3, 5, or 7 years, somewhere in that range. Because the last few years, man, imagine if you had a balloon that's a 1-year balloon or a 1-year loan with a hard money lender in this market where it's taking longer than that to do certain deals, right? To get them stabilized and rented, or to get them sold, or whatever. So being mindful, right? Be careful with giving personal guarantees on, for example, everything you have. I got a phone call from someone who was looking at lending to someone, and a private money lender, and that person was only giving a promissory note. They were not giving a mortgage or a deed of trust. And so it was an unsecured loan. And I was like, red flag, red flag, red flag. Ultimately, you also want to look at your leverage point, right? Meaning your cumulative debt to value. So loan to value, if you've got a loan at 70%, the property, 70% of what it's worth. If it's worth 100 and you have a loan for 70, well, you've got a 30%, margin there. But in the creative world, we deal with low equity stuff. So when I deal with that, I look at my portfolio loan to value. And I say, hey, I'm not trying to over leverage when it comes to my entire portfolio, because my mentors, who I respectfully call the gray hairs, are guys who've been investing from 1965, 1973, and 1975.
Nice. They're the greats.
They speak to me often about this concept of defense, but how they use defense is also with their financing. And it's the type of properties that they buy. And, that is something that if I didn't meet them in 2018, 2019, I think I would be in a very different position than I am now. Because at that point, I had only been taught offense, and I was scaling, and I had volume, and I was just gunning and going. And I truly think I'd be in a very different position. I might not be in the industry right now.
Well, we've seen so many come and go.
Right. Up and down the market.
So many operators come and go, and you're still here, Courtney. So what were some of the things that you did to put that defense in place? Thinking of one deal specifically.
So thinking of one deal specifically, I
know you
I want to give a good, okay, so I bought a house in December of 2023, subject to a 3.125% loan in one of the best neighborhoods in my target market. Like, I'm talking, when I went to high school, This was one of the neighborhoods that my sister's friend, our friends lived in, right? My mom's best friend lived in this neighborhood. And so much so that I recognized this house that when I looked through title, I saw that it was owned by one of my sister's friend's parents. So like great neighborhood, not a ton of rentals, phenomenal. Let's just call it like B class rental.
Yeah.
But I bought it with low equity, but at the same time, it was a great location. And at that time, because when I looked at, buying it subject to debt is inherently risky because of some of the nature of it, right? And so when I looked at it, I said, I don't love doing low to no to negative equity subject to deals, but I made an exception for this one because of the location.
Mm-hmm.
But then immediately what I went and did was not too long after that, I had a free and clear property that I put a loan on. And I used private money on that to be able to breathe a little bit. And when I bought this subject to deal, it had about a $1,700 a month PITI, but it would rent for $2,300.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
Until you do something called what I call pro forma PITI, which is, that was owner occupied. So, and I have it as a long-term rental. So whenever homestead falls off and when, the insurance gets adjusted, then it's going to jump up. I had estimated 1,900. Still, there's some room there, right?
Mm-hmm. A little bit, yeah.
And then the insurance crisis happens.
Oh,
and my
yeah.
happens, and it goes to 2,400.
Oh man.
Go down.
And I have property management.
Yeah.
So then you're a little bit negative.
Yeah.
More than a little bit. So then when that happens, what do I go do? I then structured a seller finance deal on a property. It's so far out of my buy box that I would not normally touch it, but I structured a phenomenal deal, acquired a property, and then I sold it on seller finance where I got a $450 a check month from that deal. And guess what I did? I put that file in with the other and I said, now kiss, you're married.
That's right.
I'm just like, right? Because like
balance
that
them
moment,
scales. That's right. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what did I go do? I went and did a deal that would make up for it repeatedly. And so what does defense look like? It's knowing I've said no to a lot of deals that I did not want to risk my portfolio for because of those elevated risks. And then I said, okay, for the ones I have made that exception for, I've immediately gone out and put in the work to, again, balance those scales.
How many doors do you have currently?
I'd have to count because I did just sell like half of them. I'm at like probably 35, 37 right now. Something like that.
That's a big downscale for you, Courtney.
I sold, move into Florida.
I must have missed the memo on that. Was the point simplicity and like leverage the liquidity into the Tampa market, or what was and plus the insurance challenges? I mean, I feel a little bit bad for you that you went from one insurance challenge state.
Oh yeah, right.
You must be getting really good at
New Orleans to Tampa.
Here's the thing though, Louisiana and New Orleans, right? We have the insurance crisis, but we don't really have appreciation, like straight up. Like we trail it like 2.5%, which national average is 4%.
Yeah, like the Midwest.
And so this is at least not that I'm betting on it, but it's an appreciating market, but it's a higher cost of living market. So the average house is more versus in Louisiana, the average house is $275. Here it's like $475. So I can capture more equity.
Yeah. And if you look at all the projections and current past couple of years and the projection of migration in the US, they're all moving there. So values are going to go up and up and up.
So I moved here for my mentor.
Yeah.
In 2014 to 2019, his rentals doubled. And then from 2019 to 22, they doubled again.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now they're down about 30%, but do that math.
Yeah.
$100,000 house becomes 200. 200 becomes 400. And now it's down 30%. So that's like 350.
Yeah.
Right.
Whatever.
You're still winning.
330, whatever that number is. You're still winning, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
In New Orleans, it was like a death by 1,000 cuts. And so, yes, it's hard.
Right.
But you know what? I believe I can get a good return on my skills here. in a way that I haven't seen in Louisiana. So I'm not trying to go where there isn't a challenge.
Sure.
I even told my spouse, I said, if the only house we buy here is our primary residence, we're going to do well.
Yeah.
But like, that's not the case. But,
That would never be you.
I mean, the way I could never, within 2 hours of us moving here, I was already talking to the neighbor about their house. And so I got, anyway, but yeah.
It's in your blood. I know.
That's
Well,
funny.
you're one of the most seasoned deal makers that I know. And a lot of us here, I mean, between all of us, we know thousands and thousands of operators. And you're definitely in my personal few thousand, top 10 operator in terms of sophistication, as well as volume in terms of what you're capable of. That doesn't mean that's what you execute, but that's definitely what you're capable of. And something that's very memorable about you for me is, in 5 minutes, can you tell us about the mobile home park that you stabilized at one point and kind of what that taught you? Because that was a very salient story for me in terms of what it taught you and how that kind of propelled you to further success.
So there's been a few. So I've sold all my mobile home parks at this point. So I'm thinking you're talking about the one that I bought.
The first one where you were like as a worker basically, and then
yeah. So when I bought that property, by the way, it came as a referral, and so I structured that deal. And if I would have gotten a great deal on the front end, again, I would be so much in a more like a hurting position, because ultimately with that deal. That deal taught me a lot of lessons. So I bought almost an entire city block. It had single families, it had commercial, it had the mobile home park, things like that. The issue is, as a deal maker, as someone who my biggest strengths are in living rooms and on the phone with people and structuring deals, raising money, all of that. This was a value add, commercial project, right?
Yeah.
That deal. So I brought on a partner to start with, and their role was supposed to be that. And then it didn't really work for them. So then I bought that partner out. Like, we just did a trade out of one of our other deals. I said, well, you go run with that one. I'll keep this. And so then I went looking for another partner, and I picked with someone who, again, had experience. This one was someone who had experience turning them that they could run it, because I needed to not. I was there at that park often, and I needed to not be there because it was taking me from these other deals, like structuring deals, finding deals, doing deals. So I brought on a partner who would do it. And, I had already bought the deal with long-term private money. That was my private money lender. And then I ended up, Jen, I don't think you know all this stuff, but no, I think you do. Eventually, we got to the point where we got pushed back from the city and the partner wanted to quit. And they're like, just give it back to the private money lender. I was like, over my dead body. And I was also like, boo you as a human, like, and as an investor, that's not what we do. But so ultimately with that deal, I was like, okay, how can I structure my way out of this? So we eventually sold it, not fully stabilized. We had stabilized part of it, but we had not fully stabilized because the day-to-day operational partner, gave up on it, right? And so that was a deal that we were able to sell, and I had to write a check at closing.
Oh,
and,
yeah. Right.
And I said, you know what? Because why? Because at the end of the day, reputation is something that is worth more than money. And I would refuse to make money be the reason why it gets a hit.
That's hard to do, Courtney. I mean, it sounds great, but there are times where that is really, really hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Which part?
Oh, to put your reputation ahead of your pocketbook, especially when you're just getting started, and especially when you're hurting. But what you've really shown me that other people haven't personified as much is that integrity compounds. Mm-hmm. That's my big word lately. If something doesn't compound for me, I don't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. If it's a side quest, doesn't compound, that's not a good use of my time, right? But something I think you've noticed is that whenever we act with integrity, that compounds into many, many more opportunities, relationships, private money, people bringing you deals, etc.
Do you guys know who Jim Rohn is? ROHN?
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
We all love him.
Yeah.
He lights a fire underneath my ass continuously.
Oh, yeah.
He said something, and it was actually on the front of my phone for like 2 years.
Yep.
He said, success is not a one-off event. It is basically a daily compounding of decisions. In the same way, failure is not a one-time event. It is the compounding of decisions over time.
Yeah.
And so keep that in mind, that like a huge part of what happens, again, it's not one catalytic event, right? There's these little decisions that led us there, right? So think of us as like, I don't know, like a car going down the street, and it's like a little shift of the steering wheel that takes us, instead of the destination we're going to, it takes us where we weren't intending. And those little decisions matter. It's things like, hey, I really need to have a hard conversation with someone, but I don't want to do that. And I'm just going to hope that no one notices.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's a little shift. That's like a little bit more than a shift, but right. And so it takes you where you don't want to go oftentimes, right? And so none of us are immune to deals going south. No one is immune to it.
No.
But at the same time, what does that defense look like? So as my deals, like some of my rentals have gone from cash flowing very well to cash flowing less, break even, or negative. Yeah. Well, how have I been able to survive that? Part of that has been equity in the portfolio and my ability to access it. So with private money, things like that, safely. It has been deal making, right? Like when I went out and did that deal that led to the seller finance that would help the other one, right?
Right.
Or it's just been flat out cash in the bank.
Yeah.
And people don't like talk. That's not sexy. That's not sexy. It doesn't sell. But at the end of the day, you want to know what kept helping me swim in a difficult market? It's those things, but also hope.
Yeah.
And it's hope that, number one, that bad markets end eventually. Amen. You might be in the thick of it, but like eventually it ends.
Yeah.
But then also know this, like, and I mean, I moved here to be every day with a guy who's been investing since 1965. He's considered, he's like the Warren Buffett of creative finance. And this guy, like, has seen so many different markets. And I'm just like,
yes.
The reminder here, if I didn't have the mentors who've seen a lot of the ups and downs, one of my, Leon Johnson told me one time, I was just getting so frustrated with like, just in general with my efforts. And he put his hand on my shoulder. He's one of my top 3 mentors, Leon Johnson. Jennifer, you know him. And Sharon, you know him too. Yeah. But Leon, he said, Courtney, give your efforts time to compound.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know right now it's tough. Like I know you're in the trenches, but give your efforts time to compound, because on the other side of it, you'll be glad you stuck with it. Because when we quit too soon, we lose out on a lot of the benefits.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what I'm trying to, remind myself, like, hey, the market is difficult, but bad markets end. They always do.
Yeah.
And I want to let my efforts compound versus cutting them off too soon.
Yeah.
So what would you say for somebody new wanting to get involved right now with this market so all over the place? What would be some advice for them?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to think with both offense and defense in mind, because one of our jobs as investors, we have many of them, but our goal here is to build wealth for our family, right? Like and for ourselves. But at the same time, one of our roles is risk analysis. And so that's coming in with that defense one, right? So it's like, yes, we want to buy. We want to leverage, grow, scale. But at the same time, surround yourself with the wisdom that says both.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I think most people would do well to get to their first 5 properties.
So when you say risk analysis, what are like some of the top things when when a deal comes to your inbox, right? Or you have a seller that approaches you, what are your top things that you recommend or would kind of require to
So
look at?
when we look at a deal, we're taught to say, hey, how could this go right? What is it worth? What does it take to fix it up? What would be that equity? What would it rent out for? What would be that cash flow? You know, the loan that I could get, what does all that require? You know, what's the return on cash, the return on investment? But we don't often talk about, well, how could it go wrong?
Right.
And so by looking at those and say, not as a let me live in fear and not do anything, but let me just take a look at that. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was, Courtney, when you do a deal, stop and analyze that deal. What went well? What do you wish you would have done? What would you not do again? You know, if I would have done that, so not only analysis on the front end, but on the back end, I would have, when I got into the point where I was just looking at knocking out the reps, I deprived myself of that analysis, which means I also deprived myself of also calling out bad habits because I carried them into the other deals. And I'm like, well, dang, I wish I would have not. And so part of that is there's wisdom, you know, in having a host of counsel, right? And so at the end of the day, part of that is saying for new people, when you're learning, part of what you want to learn is you want that level of balance, right? And so that's one of those pieces there.
Courtney, whenever you sold all those properties, did you get hit with a massive tax bill? And if so, what were some things that you did to maybe mitigate that? Because I know you're too smart to just let taxes sit unmitigated.
Also, I would say I'm religiously against taxes, so there's that part too. So it's a religious objection, not just a logical one. So part of that, yes, some of them. Now, granted, I got in the business in 2014. I didn't start keeping rentals till like 2018 because I was wholesaling and flipping everything, so I deprived myself of the benefits that time gives. Mm-hmm. And so more than half of the benefits of real estate I was not capturing because I was selling so early on so many of my properties, right? With the wholesaling and flipping. Right. So first of all, I hadn't owned a lot of them. New Orleans doesn't appreciate a ton. So it's not like my properties doubled.
Gotcha.
So yes, I had tax hits, but like something that was easy to wipe out. Like literally I bought a commercial property 2 weeks ago that like, if I just do a cost cycle on that, it'll wipe out the most of it. So there's a level that, there's a level that I was in a market where between timing and appreciation, it wasn't one of the biggest hits. So it didn't take a lot of planning.
And one thing that's amazing about you, Courtney, that most people probably wouldn't guess with your level of sophistication, you see this paper right here? This is what you taught me that you use basically as a CRM. So while there's this massive rat race, as you know, that I am kind of cloistered in, where everyone's talking about the latest CRMs, the latest AI, the latest this and that, and so on and so forth. And so the wheel turns round and round, and it changes every year. But for you, you were doing all these deals with pen and paper and a yellow pad. And that blew my mind. I was like, what? Why am I overcomplicating things so much? Oh my gosh.
I'm laughing because the first 3 years of my wholesale, I'm making like 280,000 and it was a notebook and a pen and my cell phone. Wow. And people are like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no.
You know, blowing me away here, guys.
People don't realize, like, does a CRM help? Yeah, it does. At one point, I was spending $500 a month on, and when we were doing at the top of our volume, yeah. But even today, I have my dry erase board, I have my Google Sheets, my Google Docs, and my notebook. Like, literally, that and my phone. Look, one of the bigger wholesalers back home in New Orleans has a BlackBerry. By the way, it's not a cell phone anymore because, like, that's not really a thing anymore. He buys them off of eBay when it dies because that's how he does his deals. He just sets appointments on that, talks to sellers in that or whatever.
Wow.
Like, there's a level there, like, do what works for you. Mm-hmm. Right. But people often overcomplicate it. I've met more people who have set themselves up to fail. Donna, going back to your question of like advice for people who are getting started, it's like a lot of people set themselves up to fail because they do too many subscriptions. They scale too fast.
Yeah.
Scale should come
Yeah.
once you've broken the system.
Yeah.
It should not be how you start off, right?
Yeah.
And so many people are like, well, day one, I've got to go buy all these things. I'm like,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden they have
crash fast because you run out of money.
they have to cover.
Yeah.
And then they're like, I mean, how long does it take to get your first deal? It's often not immediately.
No,
Yeah,
90
people
days
say
is that much.
3 months, 6 months. Daniel
Yeah.
Clayman, I've only heard him say this once. Daniel Clayman took 1 year to
Yep.
get his, but nobody thinks about Daniel Clayman as the guy who took 1 year to get his first deal.
Right.
They think about him as the software magnate and the dude who does a lot of development. So be patient. It might take a whole year.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I mean, it's an important thing, right?
Yeah. How are you finding your deals currently? And for somebody new too, what would you suggest for them to find deals?
Yeah, so currently I find about 80% of my deals are referral and repeat business. So it's all from people in the industry. 20% I get back into, I play in public records. But the type of deals I look for, most people aren't looking for. This is me just being hyper curious. And so then I go play deep in public records.
So that brings something up. Tell me about clear title resolutions.
Yeah, so in 2017, when I was doing wholesaling at volume, how many of you guys know you do deals and you've got the seller on board, but you got a buyer, and then all of a sudden something comes up with the title issues, and they're like, this ain't closing until this gets figured out. Or you now learn of another owner, right? Or something like that, and they're problematic. I swear they're like almost never rosy. They're always like the prickly pear. And it's like, what you probably left out in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So starting in, I got in the industry in 2014, 2017, as I was starting to ramp up and doing volume, I started doing deals where I would cure the title as a way to make money. And that looks like ownership issues, title issues, like lots of different things. So with the move last year, New Orleans, Greater New Orleans, I always say New Orleans is a well-known small town because it is 1/3 the size of Greater Tampa Bay. So I just moved to a significantly larger market that is also like one of the top in the nation. It's one of the most competitive. And I'm like, look, I just came from being a big fish in a small pond to being a small fish in a big pond. And I'm definitely not about to get into a swinging contest with the dude spending $100 a month on marketing. Like, although I can pick my size, I'm not about to do that. But at the end of the day, I decided, Louisiana, 12 years in that market. I'm not about to give up that as the honeypot that it is. I know it so well, all that.
Right.
But as I'm starting business here, I decided that I wanted to focus on basically title issues as like the majority of my business. So I'm not out here chasing the deal that everyone else is. So for example, I'm looking, like I just closed on a property that is literally had more than double the property value in liens and judgments. I bought it subject to all those liens and judgments, and I'm working through those. Right now I'm working on a property that the guy died. He was a sole person owner on the property. He died, and a cute little neighbor got an obituary and said no family came forward. Right? It's sad, right? So I built out his family tree and found his one living relative.
Wow.
And so right now I am, talking with them because the property is getting foreclosed on. So it's building out family trees, it's solving title issues, things like that.
That's impressive.
My mother is huge into genealogy, like she has a whole library downstairs. And I have many times called her up to go on ancestry.com or whatever other resources she has to go find heirs and go find that, because it's not always clear in the title records. It's not always clear in the deed records. You're absolutely right.
So when someone dies, but they don't have a spouse, they don't have children, and they don't have any living siblings or parents, who does the property go to? The answer is depends on the state.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where I'm like that. So my running joke is, so like I'm in a new town, I'm meeting a lot of new people, and this is also obviously a very gentrified town, right? Like there's so much growth here. So when my license plate says house buyer, I often get like a, like you're the bad, right? You capitalistic pig, right?
Guilty.
So, right, you guys know what I'm talking about? And so they're like, well, so anyway, I started a new gym the other day. So like 2 days ago I went in and the coach is like, hey, so your wife told us you're in real estate. Are you an agent? I'm like, no, because I'm not. They're like, so you're like a real estate investor? I was like, yeah, but like less HGTV and more Rizzoli and Isles. And they're like, huh. I was like, let's talk about it more later. But like really, I'm really more of a real estate nerd, and I'm looking for the deals that everyone like, the deals that die for everyone else. And
so speaking of nerd, Courtney, you got to tell us about your book habit, because that's what it is. It's a book habit. You almost have a problem. Yeah. Almost.
That's how I hoard, right? I hoard books.
But it's a problem we all benefit from because you always share your wisdom. So how do you make so much time to, number one, read books, and number two, does your wife have a book budget for you that's like a line item you cross? You're gonna be in trouble.
So for those who don't know, I have over 3,000 books, and that's after thinning them out from a cross-state move. This is not them. Yeah, I have like 7 in over there in another room. How do I make time? I don't think of it as I need to be reading X, Y, Z. I think of it as a study. So it is a resource that's constantly at the tip of my fingers, that if I'm at an impasse on something, it's what I go to overcome a problem. So again, think of it as a library, as a study. You don't think of your local library as, I need to read everything that exists here. You think of, well, when I need to go learn about something or do something, I pull from it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So number one, I think of it as such. I've probably read 40% of my library, and I used to read 60 books a year, but I stopped because I saw that I was hindering myself by overindulgence in information. And so then I pulled back to now where I study more than I read. And so that's had to been a shift that I've had to really make. And does my wife have balance? A book line item? No, the business does. And because at the end of the day, the majority of my books are nonfiction related to real estate. I've been buying a lot of law books and stuff like that. So anyway, but yeah.
And how do you keep the dogs away from the books? Because back when I had a dog, it's often that would end up with little chew marks.
Oh, dude.
Knock on wood, my little angels are angels in this department, thankfully.
Awesome. Well, with that, we are at the top of the hour, and it always goes so fast.
Yes.
Courtney, thank you for coming on.
Sure.
If anyone needs to reach you, they should go to CourtneyFricke.com, and that has every possible way to reach you that I could find.
I just got her on here.
I love it.
Yeah, CourtneyFricke.com really is like the way that, like, I gave up on a website a long time ago. It's literally a link tree that points you to all my socials, my podcasts, book recommendations that I have on there, things like that. But ladies, thanks so much for having me on. It's been a good conversation.
Absolutely.
Your history,
You can
Courtney.
stay after if you want, Courtney, if you have a few minutes.
No, I'm happy to do so.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Good night, ladies.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Awesome.
That flew by. Oh my gosh.
It always
I
does.
know.
Yeah.